So next we're going to have Justin from Dropbox. Justin is going to talk about democratizing coaching at scale. And just for context, in 2018 at our first TechKnowCon annual, we had Shopify on stage talk about how they did their coaching model with a team of full-time coaches on staff. And then the following year, last year at Twitter, at TechKnowCon as well, Anna from Airbnb talked about the peer mentoring / coaching model that they have at Airbnb, where every employee is encouraged to stand up and become a mentor to others, and they had something like 10% of internal employees become mentors. So I'm super excited to hear from Justin what he's building at Dropbox, continuing this pattern of democratizing coaching at scale at tech companies. So with that, I'll pass on the screen to you, Justin.
Thanks, Marco. I'll share my screen. And hello, everyone. Okay. Minimize this, put that over there, and away we go. So thanks, Chris. That was a great presentation, and I was smiling as you were going over some of your intro slides around learning philosophy. I agree with all of what you said, and it was a really nice tee up. My background, I joined Dropbox in 2019, March of 2019, about a year ago, and my career has weaved kind of in a similar way to Chris. I didn't spend that long in engineering, but I am trained as an engineer. Spent a few years in engineering and really found that I wanted more of a people-focused job. And I meandered a little bit. I went into sales for 12 years, technical sales in Silicon Valley, and learned a lot about business, but also just reinforced that I wanted a more people-focused job. And it was through this process of shifting careers that I sought out coaching myself to get coaching, and became a coach through an organization called Integral Coaching Canada up in Ottawa, Canada. Shout out to the Shopify folks. That coincidentally was where I met Gregor Bingham, who was one of the first coaches hired at Shopify. And I've learned a lot from Gregor, and we've become good friends over the years. But fast forward to the past 5 years has really been my L&D career. I joined Quantcast as the head of sales enablement, built out the sales enablement program, and then moved into head of L&D role, which was sales enablement and learning and development, sort of more of a global role. And learned a lot about the functional needs. Sales training is a very functional based training, like many of you who are engineering learning partners. It's a similar kind of concept for sales, but then also got the L&D side of the house. And one of the through lines throughout all of this change and all of this career progression has always been coaching, and the power of coaching to be able to provide systemic, long-term, sustained behavior change. And I'm not the only person who wants to do this, but democratizing coaching, I think, is a strong vehicle and a strong lever for being able to produce stronger EQ, stronger empathy, stronger results, better engagement, and all the good stuff. So that's what I'm going to talk about. My talk extended from 10 minutes to 15 minutes, so I added a little bit more. I'm going to start a little bit broad, and I've got a couple members of my team that are here that I'll touch on their remits a little bit as I go through. And I'll talk a bit about our vision strategy, a bit about enhancements to the existing exec coaching program, and then we'll get into democratizing coaching. So our vision at Dropbox is to be known as a company where leaders learn how to be great leaders and to be recognized as an industry leader in leadership development, which basically gives me and my team the challenge of making sure we're designing really good learning experiences and coaching programs, and making it so that a leader learns a lot from those programs, but also can apply that learning into their job. Because at the end of the day, there's the 70-20-10 thing, right? Which I actually really hate. I'll tell you why later. But the 70% of learning is from on the job. The 20% is through sort of coaching, mentoring, experience, feedback, and then the 10% is from traditional learning.
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I mean, I have quite a different perspective.
Oh, well, I invite that toward the end, and I'd love your input. I also have a different take on it, and I'll talk about it later. But we want to basically provide these experiences. We also want to be recognized, and we want to share back what we learn in the spirit of being good citizens, and in the spirit of sharing in the same way that Google and other companies have shared through like Google's Project Oxygen and things like that. So that's our vision. I'll talk a bit about our high-level strategy. So we have on the right-hand side, this is our learning pyramid. This shows up on all of our different presentations internally to our executive team and so forth. On the right-hand side, we have our core leadership programs. These focus on leadership transitions and have different tracks and programming for aspiring leads to new leads to experienced leads, and different programs for each. And then our executive coaching program. And then on the left-hand side, we have our accelerator programs, also known as HiPo programs, high potential programs. At the senior manager level, we have a program, and at the director level, we have a program. And these are intended to retain these folks. They're select nominated cohorts where we want to retain and prepare them for future leadership roles. This is our succession planning strategy. And what I'm going to double click on is our coaching program, our executive coaching, and the evolution of that. And I'll start by talking about our journey, and I'll walk through starting on the 2019, where we piloted a bunch of foundational programs to fill that pyramid out and then build the leadership development team. So I had the opportunity to hire two people, Stephanie and Reese, who own the programs that I talked about before. Stephanie runs our core programs, and Reese runs our executive coaching and our accelerator programs. And so the last year was just a lot of piloting and getting some building blocks in place. This year, where we are today, is about enhancing the external coaching program and piloting some mid-tier coaching vendors. What I mean by that are some of the emerging lower cost, but still high quality coaching vendors that can support more the mid-tier manager level, senior manager level. And those are all external coaches. And then the second two bullets there are around training and internal coaches. So establishing a sort of a training curriculum to train coaches at a certain level of standards, right? We want to maintain high standards around the coaching, but not spend too much time and effort and money on it. And then pilot some programs, pilot Coach's Corner, which I shamelessly took that language from Gregor at Shopify. I think they say imitation is the highest form of flattery. So I've learned a lot from what Shopify has learned there. And then not only Coach's Corner, which is more of a spot coaching program, 30-minute sessions, 60-minute sessions, but also an internal exec coaching program, 6-month engagements, and then team coaching as well. So we're doing a fair amount of piloting this year on those different programs. 2021 then will be to expand the coach pool and then launch these programs globally and across the entire company. And we need to do that in a measured way so that we have the right amount of internal coaches trained at the right level of standards that we can then apply this across the entire organization. Dropbox is about 2,800 employees. So it's nice that we're not so huge that this is a huge daunting task, but we're not so small that this is just a snap of a finger. And then pilot an internal leader practice group, and I'll touch more on that later, that we really want to continue inhabiting the creating a culture that the leaders themselves are practicing and not just receiving coaching, and establishing a coaching center of excellence, which will be the sort of culmination of all these efforts. And then, in the future here, it's really consulting to the business, which is already happening, establishing multi-year learning journeys for executives, and then really driving this concept of DDO, which is deliberately developmental organizations, where organizations are like it says, deliberately weaving development into the fabric of their company. You might hear things like creating a coaching culture. That's another kind of way of putting it. And so that's aspirational at this point, but I've got some ideas there that I'll share. Okay, so just a real quick read through on coaching, the key changes we made to the coaching program, our external coaching program, and Reese led the program at Cisco, and so brought in a lot of new ideas and a lot of best practices around renegotiated rates, around industry benchmarks, more diverse and global coaching network, increasing protection through our policies, strategically aligning all of our coaches through a coach forum on what's happening in Dropbox's business, standardizing their intake, matching, engagement process really to make it a better experience for the client, and then piloting Coaches Corner for ICs and managers. So these changes have been super impactful for the business, opening up budget for us to try new things. Now let's talk about democratizing coaching. This is our first foray into building an internal coaching program. And as I touched on the journey slide, the first strategy is to build an internal coaching capability. And we're going to start, and have already started, by tapping into the L&D team. We already have ICF certified coaches on the L&D team. And within the people team, we're going to expand and then look at broader Dropbox. And our current take on coach training is in the neighborhood of 14 to 17 hours of training and observation. That includes some coursework in terms of learning about coaching models. We use the Grow model at Dropbox, which a lot of tech companies are using these days. It's simple and it works. And then having a master coach do some observation as part of the certification. And we're even entertaining looking at an external company that will do a very light sort of almost certification. I don't think they're going to come out with an ICF certification per se, but there are some certification frameworks that we're looking at here to just to be able to put more of a stamp on it. So this is a tough thing to do because you're always going to be bumping up against scale, against the velocity of being able to scale due to the amount of coach training that you're putting everybody through. So we're experimenting in this area. The next is to pilot the Coaches Corner for ICs and managers. So every IC will get a 30-minute session with a coach. They sign up. We're positioning this as coaching, not therapy, not personnel related things that they should be talking to their HR VP about, but really a place to come, gain clarity on a goal, get unstuck on the situation, and move forward. Managers will have access to 60-minute sessions, and then we're also piloting as part of this a 6-month coaching program as well for select leaders. And then team coaching is another thing that we're really interested and intrigued about. I mean, I think team coaching is a way to further scale, just given that you can get more numbers of people through team coaching. And there are different formats. We've already done some of this as part of our hypo programs, where we've got a cohort broken up into small groups that are coaching each other around a project. So we've got some team coaching happening already, but we'd like to continue working toward a standardization on a more general offering for team coaching. And team effectiveness is another angle that we're doing, but this is team coaching specifically, which could be an intact team, it could be a project team, it could be other things. We're going to experiment with it. And then ultimately, we want to leverage technology to support the scaling. So we need to look at calendar tools and other tech that we can utilize to help us out as we scale. So that is our current, I wish I could say we were further along. We had a lot of data to share. I certainly will be happy to share that when we have it, but that's our current strategy. And so far we've had some Coaches Corner sessions. They've been very well. We got wait lists going. We've got, the uptake on this is going to be no problem. I think people really like getting access to coaching. They're giving us great feedback. This is a no-brainer in my opinion. It's the hunger is there, the thirst is there. It's just a matter of how can we scale this in a thoughtful but in a way that where we maintain standards for the coaching. But I'm really excited to see how this pans out. The other thing, so I talked about this 70-20-10, right? And which somebody chimed in earlier that they had issues with it. Yeah, it's certainly not it's a little bit of an archaic model, I think, but there is something to be said that a large part of what a leader or any employee learns is just on the job. They have a job that they're doing, they're learning through making mistakes or whatever it might be. And I am very interested in occupying the 70%. Now, what that means is, how do we weave in learning experiences in the flow of work? How do we not also sort of decentralize L&D to a degree, meaning traditional L&D is we set up programs and classroom workshops and so on, and you know, we invite people, they show up, hopefully get some learning out of it. And we're going to continue to offer that. I think that's table stakes nowadays, but we want to also provide, and I think coaching has been a great way over the years to expand the pie of what L&D and what learning can actually, how learning can impact. But we're also looking now at this idea of creating a DDO, a deliberately developmental organization. One of the famous cases here is Bridgewater Associates. So this comes from a book, this term comes from a book called An Everyone Culture by Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy out of Harvard. And they maintain that they did a study that companies who actually weave in development as just part of their fabric of their culture, kind of like Satya's quote that Chris shared earlier, which was a great quote. You know, learning is just always on kind of thing. We're always learning. And so therefore, we're all responsible for learning. And, you know, Bridgewater is Ray Dalio's hedge fund company. They've done a tremendous job actually weaving in practices. Right after a meeting, you give each other feedback just automatically after every meeting. Everybody does Myers-Briggs and everybody knows each other's types. And there's all kinds of things that they've woven in that can be daunting, can be a little bit, I think, confronting for some people, frankly, but they've found it to be very good and created a strong culture. So what we want to start experimenting with are running internal coaching practice groups for managers where they're not only getting coached, but they are coaching each other and they're learning the models. They're wrestling with the GROW model and they're playing with it. And we're creating, you know, I've heard it being called dojo from Nathaniel, who's a colleague of mine, who's a martial artist. Dojo is this concept of practicing. You're getting on the mat. Some people say it's like you're fine tuning or you're practicing your instrument or you're doing reps or push-ups or whatever your metaphor is. We're creating this practice room, this learning circle within the organization for people to show up and learn. So that's one strategy. The other is just to continue providing training and toolkits on the GROW model. So having an internal, this is part of our center of excellence, which will be just a place where any leader or any employee eventually can go to learn how to be a better coach. And then the third is working with the C-suite and people team leadership to institute systemic drivers. So this has to be woven into the culture in a systemic way, right? So through performance reviews, which is already happening, and even tied to coaching compensation, or tied coaching to actual compensation. So really holding people accountable for this type of development through systemic levers. And so these are some areas that I'm very interested in. Marco, how am I doing on time? I think I'm just about ready to wrap up.
You have 10 more minutes, including Q&A, so feel free to use it as you wish.
Oh, great. Yeah. So I think that's it. I think that's where I'm at. I know I just kind of ran through a whole bunch of stuff, but I'd love to, maybe this would be a good time for some dialogue or some answering of questions.
Got it. Cool. So one question that I had was just how you're thinking about sort of democratizing coaching, more specifically, how is that, is there like a playbook, or how are you onboarding people to become coaches?
Yeah, so we have a program and we're just now designing it. So Reese on my team is working on it. We're looking at, so you're talking about like the specific requirements and the actual training. We want to basically build out modules. So currently thinking of 4 hours of modules, coaching fundamentals. We want to train on the philosophy, best practices of coaching, some guides and templates, do some scenario-based coaching practice. We want to be sure to train on the code of ethics with coaching, right? So ICF has a whole code of ethics that we want to follow. What's coaching? What's therapy? Where are the lines? Do we coach people when they bring you an outside of work topic? How do you work with that? So we want to make sure we're putting some guardrails around, and then after the sort of coach fundamental training, we want to actually give practice, just real in the room, 10 hours of observed practice, so that we can, one, give the practice, but two, also observe and give feedback. So that's the current structure as we're thinking about it, and we'll have to play with that. We might have to pull back on that if we're finding it's taking too long. We're looking at hiring an external master coach to come in and do some of that work. So yeah.
And so one thing that I'm observing, and I find it interesting, is you're taking a very holistic approach to coaching, right? Like you're acknowledging that there's this traditional sort of C-suite coaching that has been existing in big corporations for a while, and then you're adding under that umbrella peer coaching, team coaching, and so I'm curious, where do you see this going? Do you see, and I think Aaron also asked this question, do you see the pendulum swinging more towards peer coaching, where it's employees coaching one another, or is it going to be always some kind of blend of professional outside coaches as well as internal coaches, and like how's that mix going to work under this unified umbrella?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one, honestly, I can only speculate on. Frankly, I don't know that anybody knows, but I think that there will always be internal coaching practitioners, so to speak, because these are folks who have, like, I wouldn't expect any, let's say, engineering manager or director of product management or something like that to be a phenomenal coach. Even though there are some of those folks who are phenomenal coaches, I wouldn't expect that they have the amount of hours in addition to their day job to get to a 10,000 level of 10,000 hours mastery type coach. So I do think there's something to be said for strong coaches. The question maybe is more, where do you apply that expertise in the organization? And then where, and I do, by the way, believe that peer coaching and opening up coaching to all employees in terms of this is also the future. Not only peer coaching, but again, this thing about training the managers themselves to be stronger coaches by really weaving it into inhabiting their workflow and weaving it into ensuring they bring it to their teams, and that they're weaving in coaching systemically in terms of in their team meetings maybe, or in just another little pockets of practice that are happening. So I do think it's a both and. I do think both will coexist. It'd be great, and then maybe I'm wrong. At the end of the day, maybe I'm wrong that all those other employees, in addition to their day job, couldn't also become really strong coaches. I'd like to be wrong. I mean, I think that would help everybody.
Yeah, and Nathaniel, we have a question that sort of riffs off of this, and that's about maintaining quality and scale, right? Like, how do you democratize it yet maintain quality of the professional coaches in this like model of like lightweight training employees to become coaches? And so, yeah, as you scale, how do you think about quality?
Yeah, well, I think, like I said, that the training that I laid out a moment ago is about 14 hours, give or take, maybe 17, depending on what level of coaching the person's doing. And that feels like a little bit on the high side in terms of the trade-offs between being able to scale and at a certain velocity. But I don't know yet. And so we'll find out. But I do think for sure there's a minimum level. We're not going to go much lower than that, just because, you're giving people the keys to a vehicle, and you want to make sure they know what they're doing, because especially in life coaching, but also in executive and professional corporate coaching, you can really harm somebody if you're not providing. Some emotions come up. Maybe it's linked to some trauma that the person has had in their life, and suddenly the coach is just coaching them to power through this thing, and really they're out over their skis, right? So we do want to maintain not only the ethics piece, but some coach quality piece so that we're making sure the impact is strong. That's where I'm a little bit wary of peer coaching programs that just like, oh, I want to be a coach. Sure. Okay, great. Everybody just start coaching each other. And so, I think there's some minimum standards are important.
Got it. And speaking of standards, Andrew brought up the question of navigating the privacy concerns when it comes to coaching, and there's some new regulations in terms of that. Any comments on that?
On privacy concerns related to confidentiality?
I believe, and yeah.
I don't see the question, but we have basically everything that we do, we maintain confidentiality. I mean, I think that's table stakes. Confidentiality is absolutely critical, and we put that right up front whenever we introduce coaching and any of our coaching programs. One thing I want to briefly say that almost counters my own point a little bit, but I do want to mention that in the training and workshops that we've done around coaching for employees, where usually you teach somebody a group about the GROW model, and then you split everybody into pairs, right? And you have everybody practice on each other. I've been actually impressed with the way people have been able to quickly grab the GROW coaching model, give coaching to each other. So I don't want to poo-poo that and say that, you need 10 hours. Everybody's got to have 10 hours or something like that. I think it just depends on the complexity of the topic and what we're dealing with. So that's another experiment that we're running to find out.
Yeah, and just to riff off of that, and Airbnb had very similar results when they launched last year, when they launched the peer coaching model. They had people adopt it really quickly, and the results were positive. There's a video from that we're happy to share later on from last year's TechKnowCon. So it seems like you're getting the similar results. Any concerns with respect to work from home and all that, like things moving online? Somebody asked that question.
Related to just doing now everything's virtual, basically.
Yeah.
It's funny. We found that the virtual has not been an issue at all. In fact, the virtual might allow us to scale it even more quickly. People seem to it seems to transmit well virtually. You might lose a little fidelity in terms of really being super present with somebody. I mean, you have to be obviously try to be there and understand, look at their body language and so forth. But I find that you can do that with the technologies that. In fact, Reese on my team came from Cisco, as I mentioned, and they actually did a pilot. They did a study on this and piloted this at Cisco because they initially had a lot of pushback when they introduced this idea of virtual coaching. They had pushback from the leadership across the company that this would work, and it ended up working just fine. And so I think it allows us to, now you don't have to walk from conference room to conference room kind of a thing, right? You just open up your computer and you're into your coaching session.
Cool.